So hello, Laurie. Welcome.
Hi, Lauren. Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
I'm so excited to have you on today. So everyone, this is Laurie Hewitt, and she has been channeling for over 30 years. And Laurie receives messages from your spirit guides, your angels, your soul council, and any other beings of light who have a message for you. She is mostly clairaudient, meaning that she hears beings speak to her. Over time, her other, quote, clairs or psychic abilities have developed as well. She helps you remember who you are and why you are here now. Her hope for all of her readings is that they are empowering for you, that they help you move consciously on your path in this life and assist you in awakening to your true self. Welcome, Laurie.
Thank you. Gosh,
That's no
that sounds
small
good when you
undertaking.
read it.
I'm like, wow, she has a lot of work to do.
Yeah. I feel like I sort
Wonderful.
of backed into it, but yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about your journey into channeling. And
Great.
Laurie, where are you joining us from today?
I'm actually in the Denver, Colorado area.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful, Laurie. So excited to have you.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah. So my first question for you, in case people don't know, what is channeling?
Channeling for me is receiving messages that I know are coming from some other source than my own mind and ego. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's, for me, it's intuition. It's that sudden knowing, a certain feeling that I might get kinesthetically. Mostly though, for me, and when I really think about how I've kind of come into this, was that I always hear someone speaking to me. And it's not speaking like I hear them with my ears. It's more of, it's in my mind, and it can sound like me, and yet I know it's not me at the same time.
Mm-hmm. How do you tell the difference between just what is your own mind and kind of mental chatter? Because I know as humans, sometimes we just have a constant
Oh,
stream of thoughts, never-ending thoughts. So
yeah.
how are you able to tell the difference between what's your own mind and what is this outside information?
That's a very good question. And I continually ask myself that all the time and it took me a very long time, years and years, to really discern the difference between my mind chatter and when it was spirit talking to me. What I finally was able to discern is that my mind jumps all over the place. It's like a little squirrel. It's like, oh, shiny thing over here. Oh, wait, over here. Where with spirit or whoever's speaking with me, when it's an energy that's coming through from someplace else, a higher frequency, a higher vibration, it's calm, it's always loving, it stays on task, it doesn't get distracted easily. So just the quality of it is very different, and the information is different. With my mind, a lot of times the thoughts are judgmental, angry, um, just kind of mean sometimes about myself at times.
Yeah.
Where with these beings, when they step in, it's always kind and loving and gentle and supportive. So that is also a very big difference for me. And that's how I know that it's a being with a higher frequency than mine and not my own brain.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. It took me a long
Yeah.
time to figure that out. And sometimes when I'm channeling, people will remember they've had a reading with me. A lot of times I will say, wait just a minute, let me double check, because I will step back and make sure that my mind, my ego isn't slipping in and saying something. I want to make sure I
Mm-hmm.
really am hearing it clearly. Because sometimes, I mean, we're human, and so mind and
Yeah.
ego are really good at slipping in and sometimes pretending or mimicking being spirit, saying something similar. but I need to make sure it's not something that I believe or I think. So I'm always working to make sure that my ego is out of the way. Sometimes Spirit will say, tell them this, and then they will pull up something that I personally know as a human being or that I have experienced. So then they'll have me say that. And I usually try to remember to say, okay, Spirit wants me to share with you and tell them that this is coming from me, not their guides or whoever's with us.
Yeah, really cool. Yeah, I can see the difference between the two.
Right. Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been channeling for over 30 years.
Yeah, probably more than that, but I would say that
Definitely.
my real, kind of what I consider my official start is probably about 34, 35 years.
Wow. So how did this all start? How did you, like, were you hearing things in your head? Did you go to a class where you learned how to channel? How did you kind of realize, oh my gosh, I'm hearing something and it's not my own thoughts? How did that all begin?
Thinking back on it, when I very first started and started reading some books, what I realized is I've always gotten messages, even as a child. I just didn't know that that's what it was. And I thought everybody had this thing in their, I just thought maybe it's my conscience or I didn't know. It was just this kindly voice always in my head that protected me, watched over me, told me what to do or not. I mean, like if I was heading toward danger, it would stop me or it would give me information. But I didn't know what it was called. So in the 70, I'm trying to think here, 70s, in the early 70s, mid 70s, let's say, after I finished undergraduate school, I was working with my manager at the mental health center. And she was big into this. She's the only other person I'd ever met. She was an astrologer. And so she used astrology quite a bit, but also was very interested in just spirituality before it was called spirituality. And she sent me home one day and said, you need to go read Jane Roberts' books, Seth. And, and she said, get me on Conversations with Seth. And I was like, okay. I did. Completely blew my mind. Completely opened this door. I could feel this door opening in my head as I read more and more of the Seth information. And that, I think, is what really opened up this doorway for me. I still didn't think I could channel because there was no way I was leaving my body and allowing some other being to take over and speak through me. That just wasn't going to happen. And I thought that's what channeling was, because that's the only experience I ever had of it. So then I keep reading books. And this was a time where late 70s, early 80s, where it wasn't called New Age. It wasn't called spirituality. It was called occult. And so a bookstore, I sort of had to sneak in and look for the self-help section, and then next to that, the occult, kind of slip over and grab a book that spoke to me. And I was fortunate in that specific books would pretty much literally fall off the shelf in my hand. One of the first ones I ever read after the Seth books was called Companions in Spirit. And I apologize, I don't remember the authors. There were two, and it was a channeled book, but it opened the door even further because they talked about communicating with your guides. What were guides? How to communicate with them, the angels, how to do meditation, how to protect yourself when you were sitting in meditation, all the things I didn't know. And they sort of opened the door a little bit about how anybody and that everybody channels. And I was like, well, that's interesting. So then I found another book called Opening to Channeling. And I was like, okay. In there, they also described all the different ways that people can channel. They said, yes, doing basically what Jane Roberts did, the trance channeling, where you just step out and somebody steps in, is fine and do that. But that's not the only way to channel. That was key for me, because then it was like, well, maybe this. And then they talked a little more about children and guides and how children are much more open and sometimes have imaginary friends. And actually their guides. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Maybe that's who my little friend was until I was about 5,
Mm-hmm.
So then as I continued to work on that, I began to pay more attention. I went to a class and the psychic was there and she was introducing everyone to their guide. And I'd never thought about guides, wasn't aware that I had any. She introduced me to this guide who stepped up and I began working with him.
Cool.
And it was so interesting because when he first stepped in, he would show himself looking like Gandalf from
Oh my
the
God.
wizard standing there, or Merlin standing there in front of me. And for years, when I called him in, that's what I saw in my third eye, was this wizard standing there. Now, not so much. Occasionally, I'll see him as the wizard, but mostly now I recognize his energy, his frequency, so that I trust that he's always with me. And if I check in and say, "Are you here?" what I hear is, "Of course, I am always with you." But it took years and years for me to build that relationship and not need the visual.
You mentioned the opening to channel book. Is that the Oren and Deben book?
Yes.
Those 2 guides?
Yes.
Oh, I love that book. I've also read it.
Yes.
Fantastic book. It's a channeled book about channeling.
It is. And they used to do classes, I guess, where people could come and they would teach you how to channel. But just reading that book was a gift. It's like I feel like the universe always brought me the books that I needed early on to help with my progress and to open me up to the idea that you can do this. Because I would have never thought that I could. And for years, I channeled a little bit and then I would stop. And then I'd channel a little bit and then I would stop because I would get insecure or I felt like I was just making it up or I wasn't doing a good enough job or whatever. And so I spent years starting and stopping, honestly.
Yeah, that's so understandable for sure.
Yeah.
So while you were kind of experimenting with channeling over the years, learning, reading, practicing, you also had a regular, quote, regular person job. So so tell me a little bit more about that and how were you able to kind of manage this whole, I'm a channeler, I'm a psychic, I'm wanting to develop while you were working in a normal job. How was that for you?
Honestly, I hid it for a long time. I felt like I had these 2 separate lives. I had my professional life as a clinical social worker, and then I had this other, what I considered my real life, where I had crystals and listened to them and did channeling and meditated and did all this stuff that I didn't feel like was part of my mental health because I started out as a mental health professional.
Cool.
So when I first started, after graduate school, I worked in a mental health center, first with older adults in nursing home settings. Then I worked in addiction services as well. And then just kind of had a general mental health practice where I saw whoever came in. I worked a lot early on with the chronically mentally ill as well. So I had to be very cautious, and I was still pretty new to this. So I kind of kept it on the down low. And as I got a little more confidence in my ability to channel or receive messages, what I would notice is when I was working with clients, I would get information. And what I realized was intuitively, again, for me, it's probably my guide or their guides giving me information. I was getting that information with my client and using it, but didn't know that that's what it was. Then I started to be able to identify it and be at least conscious of it. I still didn't share it, but at least it gave me a little more insight and ability to work with my clients.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
When I worked in hospice care, that's probably the one place where I felt like my real life, this channeling, my spiritual path was really congruent with my work life. Because when people are dying in that process, they begin to have those experiences. They're deceased family show up, their angels show up. And I had many, many clients who would say to me, oh, my sister was here visiting me today, and I knew her sister was deceased. Or my guardian angel stands behind me, and I can just see the tips of their wings around, around my bed. So I knew that that was a place where I could definitely open up and allow that information to come through, because it would help the person on their path toward transition, as well as the family, and helping the family normalize that your loved one isn't crazy. They're not delusional. Yeah. This is real. And then when families, after the person passed, they would almost whisper it, last night, my dad showed up and started talking to me. And I'm like, yeah. So it helped to normalize, because I knew that was a real thing. So working with hospice was one of my favorite jobs, actually.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Yeah. And I was able to, a lot of times when clients passed over, then I was able to sit with their loved ones later, and sometimes they would come through and give messages. I didn't channel it as such, but I would hear the message for them and then relay it in a way that they could hear it and appreciate it and take it in.
Mm-hmm. So you wouldn't necessarily outright say, oh, so-and-so is here with the message, but you'd kind of
exactly
adjust it how they could digest.
Yes, exactly. Same message. I just didn't announce that, oh, mom is standing here and she says.
Yeah, I'm hearing her. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. But it was nice, because it was a nice way to integrate the two. Mm-hmm. And then I retired from that profession, which was nice, and really have thrown myself more and more into doing what I do and being much more open about it with everyone. It's like, take it or leave it. This is who I am. Yeah. This is what I do.
Cool. Yeah, I've met so many people on their spiritual journeys who feel like they're living two lives. And I've met a lot of mental health people, psychologists, doctors, healers, who are also developing their spiritual abilities. But it's like they have two separate worlds, and they feel like they don't really belong together. They have to keep them completely separate. And I mean, it just feels like it can tear you apart to have these two different identities. Was that the case for you? Like two separate worlds?
It can be a challenge, because this isn't what I do. This is who I am. And so it's like kind of closing off part of who I really am was difficult. And I hope, and I think there are more and more mental health professionals out there who are starting to integrate the two and are coming closer to that. And that makes me hopeful that the mental health profession will open up at some point a little more. And there are therapists, mostly in private practice, who can blend the two. And I'm gratified to see that, because I think that's so needed. I think especially now in our world, that people are needing support, needing confirmation, needing someplace to go and talk about this stuff. And the therapist is a great example of that. It's like, okay, I can go and see this person. They're going to listen to me. They're hopefully not going to try to hospitalize me. And so they find a person who can open up and listen and believe what they're saying and validate it for them.
Yeah, create a safe space that, hey, this is normal. It's just a psychic ability that we all have. We don't all tap into it, but it's normal. You're not a crazy person hearing voices.
Right.
Yeah, that would be so, I'm sure that'd be so nice for people to be able to find a therapist, or even just like to have a session with you, or, to find a community and say, hey, I'm hearing voices, and have someone else say, that's okay, that's normal, and kind of guide you.
Exactly. Well, during the pandemic, I met a woman, Ari Hunneford, and we had a couple of readings together, and it became very clear Spirit was guiding her towards starting a meetup, which she started pretty much right as the lockdown stuff happened. And she calls it Awkwardly Zen. And it's a
Cool.
great meetup because at a time where everybody was not socializing, everybody was stuck at home, isolating, this meetup shows up and it's about your spirituality. It's about come and join us and talk about spiritual things with us and what you believe. It's been a huge success. And for me, it was so gratifying because I had spent all of my life, adult life, alone with this. Basically, maybe one or two people at a time would I have that I could talk about it with, but nothing like this. And then to sit in this meeting with 20, 30, 40 other people who are all on a spiritual path and hear them all talk about similar experiences was incredibly wonderful. And was the thing I had been looking for my entire life when I started on this journey. So it's just been a huge, I think, resource for people and just wonderful to have out there. And now I feel like there are more and more of these meetups out there, and that you can find, if you're on a spiritual journey, you can find a support group now, where back in the day, you did it quietly with maybe one or two other people, because otherwise people look at you funny and you lose credibility.
Totally.
Yeah.
So tell me just a little bit more, like you're coming up in the 70s and 80s, learning this. I mean, really, what was it like to be like, I have one person to share this with? I mean, did you find friends you could practice on? Would you have like clients on the weekends? And just, I mean, like mentally, emotionally, what was that like for you?
At that point, I was not channeling. I still hadn't really believed that I could do that at this point. But the woman who, I always call her my door opener, she was the woman who really kicked open that door in my mind and got me moving forward on this path. She and I and one, maybe two other people that she knew would get together on the weekends and have a meditation group. And we would sit on the floor in a circle and do a group meditation. During that, I would receive images or messages that, again, I wasn't calling channeling by any means, but I would get, and we all would, and then we would share them at the end of the meditation. We'd kind of talk about what was it that we were seeing or getting or whatever. And so that was a very small group that I felt like I could share everything with. I didn't share it with anybody else. So it was very much contained. And that's pretty much how it was, I think, for all of us, that we basically were on this journey alone, maybe shared it with one or two other people that either had expressed some interest or said, oh, hey, I'm getting these messages, or some way we knew that they connected with us. So it was lonely. It was very isolating. It's like I had all of this, but no one to really share it with. So I was grateful that those folks were around. Now, this was in Southern Indiana, Western Kentucky, and we definitely had to be cautious there. Didn't want to be labeled a witch in quotes at that point. Then I moved to Colorado, and again, was pretty much isolated because I had to meet people, new friends. I had one person I met that was a Native American, actually, and was on her spiritual path, so we could talk a little bit about it. Other than that, it was pretty much a lonely road. And then just here and there, as I developed friendships, I would find one or two people that I could connect with and start talking with, or I would find a group that I could do like a meditation group with, which was very helpful and helped me along my path and to get a little more confidence in the messages that I was getting at the time. So it's been pretty isolating up until probably the last 15 years, maybe 20. When I met Douglas, he was doing, he's a friend of mine who also does some great work as well. He was doing the Life Between Lives regressions that was based on Michael Newton's work, who wrote The Journey of the Soul. And he and I connected in that way because I went to him for one of those journeys, and then he and I connected. And that helped tremendously because he believed me and he supported me, and he actually helped me get so much better at my channeling than I had been, gave me more confidence in my channeling than I had had. And it was just practicing with him, which was helpful.
Lots of practice, huh?
Lots of practice. And that's the thing. It's about practicing, allowing yourself to believe it, to continually do it and trust it. And that just comes over time. I asked once why I was able to channel these beings, and one of the things that my guide said was because you listen and you pay
wow.
and you're willing to hear it and then say it. And I allow them to come through and say it. So it's exactly what they say. I don't change the wording at all.
You're not editing or pausing or second guessing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So as much as possible, I let them just come through. It sounds like me, but it's their words coming through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what other advice would you have for people who are wanting to learn to channel? You know, I've heard you mention you were in a meditation group for a while, you were reading books, you would do lots of practicing. But if someone's hearing this and they're like, wow, you know, this sounds really cool, I'd love to be able to receive these messages, where would you tell them to start, and what could they start doing today to start developing their channeling abilities?
Meditation is key, I think. It's have a meditation practice. Meditate daily, if at all possible, at least 20 minutes a day, if not more. And when you're sitting in that place of stillness, which can be a challenge for our minds, but the more you practice you can use music, guided meditation. As you sit in those meditations, invite your guide to step in, invite an angel to step in and give you a message, and just pay attention. One of the things I did early on was writing. So I would be in a meditative state. I'd have a pad of paper and a pen with me, and then I would just start writing whatever I was hearing. Whatever came through, I just wrote it. Didn't even worry about punctuation or anything, just wrote. Then when I came out of the meditation, I would look at it and I could tell where my mind stopped and somebody speaking to me started. And so if you do that over time, you begin to notice where that information starts to come in, and you find that your writing is coming through you, not from you. The other thing nowadays would be to find a metaphysical spiritual bookstore in your area, because there's, I'm sure, bound to be someone there offering classes. That would be another great way to start. There's all kinds of groups around that offer you opportunities to practice, who teach you how to do it, who help you learn how to set boundaries and protect yourself, and all the things you need to know. So find a class. Yeah.
Find a class. And I also absolutely loved the book that we mentioned before, Opening to Channel. To me, I feel like if you were to pick one book to get you started, that has everything in it.
Yes, that would be a perfect place to start. And I think it's still in print.
I bought it a couple years ago.
Yeah.
You know, I'll look after this, and if it's still out, I'll link to it in the description. So if people want to pick it up, they can find it.
That would be great, because it is a great book, but it was written a long time ago. So I've been doing this a very long time. So, but yeah, it is probably one of the best books I ever found. If you're in the Denver area, there's a gentleman here, Charles Cox, C-O-X, who does classes all the time, and he's great. And there's many other people in the area that are also offering these kinds of classes. So it's just finding who fits for you.
Yeah. Cool. So you mentioned you were learning how to protect yourself as you're channeling. So can you tell me a little bit more about that, and why do you need to protect yourself? You know, are there negative entities, or what are you protecting from?
When I first started, opening up, especially meditating, and then trying to open up to see if I could get messages. One of my fears, because it was the way I was raised, was that something evil would come in and possess me or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't believe that at this point. And yet I also know that there are lower vibrations, let's say lower energies, that if you're open, and they can step in and also try to communicate with you. Well, I didn't want that. I only wanted communication from some being of light that only had the best of intentions. So one of the books I read, and it was about setting your space for meditation, is to see yourself in this golden bubble, like surrounding you like an egg, completely head to toe, and sitting in that, calling in the divine light to surround you, and then grounding yourself. So also asking that, visualizing that you have these roots coming out of the bottoms of your feet, going deep into the earth to ground you. And then I would also then have the healing energy from the earth come up through those roots, up through me to my heart chakra. And from there, then I would also have my attention go to my crown chakra and have this divine light, kind of like this little thread of divine light that would come down through my crown chakra and come in and meet up in the middle of my heart chakra. And from there, this divine light would spread out to my whole room and protect me. Cool. And I felt safe in that. And I also asked my guide to be with me and to not allow any being, anything to come into my space that wasn't of the highest vibration, of the highest and best intentions. And I feel like that's always been the case now. So that now when I'm going to do a reading with someone, I ask archangels to come in and set the space. So technically I would have archangels in each corner of this room, if you will. And then my guide would be here. And again, my guide really acts as my gatekeeper, does not let anything or anyone through to communicate with me unless he agrees that, yes, they have the best and highest of intentions. Otherwise, you don't get through. If something does come through, like when I used to do readings in person, like in my home, I had Archangel Michael stand at my door so that when they were coming into my home, anything that was attached to them, anything of lower vibration that I didn't want in my environment, he would take it, hold it at the doorway. Cool. They would come in, we would have our session, and then they were free to take it when they left, but it wasn't allowed to come into my space.
Cool. So definitely having that protection. And then if you're just beginning and practicing, being able to have discernment, I guess, because it is possible there are, lower vibration, negative energies and entities, which can try to plug in. I've definitely had that happen before when I was starting, and they, they can sound just like any other being, but then they start to trick you or say negative things. So really having that discernment, and knowing, okay, that's not of love, that's not of light, and just kind of letting it go, telling them to go away. And eventually, like you're saying, once you do it and practice having the protection, would you say now, you just always connect to light, like there's no negative entities or energies try to get in your field?
No, I feel like I've got enough protection. And there are times where I still ground myself and surround myself in the light. But I feel like because I'm calling in the archangels and my guide is there, I just always check in with my guide and say, please protect me. Don't allow anything in that is not of the highest good. And so I feel confident in that. That's the thing about working with your guides. The more you work with them, the more you get to know them. It's like any relationship. The stronger it becomes and the more you get to know each other. And so I trust now that when I ask my guide for that protection, I just know that it's there and I don't have to worry. It's like driving. People laugh at me, but they also know it's true. I have what I call my driving angels, and they, when I get in my car to go anywhere, I ask them to be with me, to fly at each wheel, and to please protect me and get me there safely and get me home safely as well. When I was working, because I traveled a lot in the city to do home visits, I have many stories and times where I know the angels were with me, or it would have been a horrible accident, either my fault or somebody else's, but they protected me, and I felt that for a minute. So I also have what I call my parking angels, which people also laugh at and ask me to use when we're out and about. And that came from one of the books I read early on, who said to test this, to really play with it and really prove to yourself it's real, ask your angels to get you a parking space. And so I started doing it. It was silly, but I did it, and it worked every time.
Wow.
And so now if I'm going to a place that I know is really crowded or busy, I always ask them to get me a parking space in the area that I need it, and they always do.
Wow, how cool.
And everybody can do that. I mean, just play with it. It's really fun. And that was their message, is we're here to help you in your day-to-day life. That's why we're here. And we're here to protect you. Ask us and we'll be with you. And so I always just ask them to be around.
Cool. Yeah, I guess I was kind of wanting to ask you, following from that question, like, why would you channel? You know, I think some people would say, well, I don't need to talk to other people. I don't need that information. You know, I'm fine. You know, I can take care of myself. So what would you say, what are the benefits of channeling? Why do you do it? How can people really, like, how can it really improve someone's life?
Let me divide that question up, because I think there's two parts to this. I think working with your guides, working with your angels, communicating with them helps you get through this life. Being a human being is hard. Living on the earth is a pain, as we all know, and being a human is one of the hardest things to be. So we've been given from Source these incredible beings of light who agree to come with us and help us survive this world. And so working with them just makes your life better, I think. I've always had that sense of protection, even as a child. I just, again, didn't know what to call it. So now I realize my guide has always been with me. The angels have always been with me. One of the books I read was that you're not allowed to be born alone. Your guardian angels come with you. Well, I know they've been with me always, and we all have them. So communicating with them, I think, just makes our life easier, protects us from a lot of things, just helps us get through this life. Channeling, which in a sense that is channeling, but more of a personal nature. Channeling for others, I felt like I have always been pushed and nudged toward this, that it was something my soul came to do, it was part of my soul path, and that I could always say no, and I did. Like I said, I had many years where I started and stopped. Ultimately, though, I couldn't not do it because it's what my soul was nudging me toward, pushing me toward, encouraging me to do, because it's why I'm here. And the whole point, for me at least, was to be that door opener, if you will, for other people. So as a soul, and me then as the human being in cooperation, brings those messages that people need to hear so that they can wake up and pay attention to their higher consciousness and move more fully onto their soul path, to really recognize I'm not just this bag of bones. I'm not this physical being. I'm this divine being, this soul, this energy that lives within me is my true self. And it's here to do whatever it's here to do. So having cooperation between soul and human makes it all so much easier.
Cool. Yeah, I can see how helpful that would be and how hard human life is. Like, any help we can get, I would take it.
Exactly. Like, who wouldn't? If you knew you had all these beings around you that you could call on, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, at least that's my attitude about it. So
Wow. Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel the same way.
Yeah. Well, once I
Mhm.
read Michael Newton's book, Journey of the Soul, where he was a psychologist back way before any of this was ever talked about in the
Mm.
60s and 70s. He was doing past life regressions with his clients, and some of them would move beyond this life and into a non-physical life, like, and he called it the in-between life, basically back into the
Cool.
soul realm. And that's where a lot of this information comes from that I use today, is that I always channeled these beings, but I never could say exactly who they were. When I read his book, and his clients identified them as their souls meeting with their soul council, is what he called them. This bell went off in my head, and I was like, that's who I keep channeling. That's who's coming in, because those are the kinds of messages I would get when I was doing readings for people. And so I I'm not very good, and wasn't very good back then even, at telling people about when you're going to meet your love of your life, when you're going to get a raise, job, kind of
Mhm.
basic things people want to know.
Yeah.
Those weren't the kind of messages that I got, because I was getting something higher, so that it was about your soul awakening and you were realizing, this is who I really am, and this is why I'm here. I have this path that I put together before I was ever born. And so that at least gave me a name for who it is that I channel most of the time. Now that's since very much expanded, but at the time that was a revelation, that, oh, we
Wow.
also have this group of beings who watch over us and keep in contact with the soul self, who try to keep us on that path that we agreed to before we came into this world.
Wow. Yeah, so I want to hear all about the different groups. So you've mentioned your soul council, angels, spirit guides, beings of light. Can you tell people a little bit more about each of these groups? What are they like? You mentioned guardian angels. Um, yeah, what are they like? How do you experience them?
So angels, I think, are probably the most common thing that people have experience with. If you have any kind of religious
Mm.
background at all, or just in general, angels are everywhere and have been. They've been with us since the beginning of time. And so the angels are always with us. You can look it up. There's all kinds of angels. I mean, the archangels are these group of angels that take on special duties and special talents that they have, that they bring us as human beings. Um, there's kind of everyday angels, I suppose I would call them, are the
Like
angels that,
your parking
yes,
angels
my
and your
parking
driving
angels,
angels.
my driving angels, all of those angels, my guardian angels, they're here
Mm,
to help me with day-to-day things, I think. Although
mm,
I think all of the angels are here to help us all the time with anything, and I don't know that it's, people always want to know names and how do we call on them, and
yeah.
you know, I'm sure there is all of that, and we have lots of people who specifically work with angels who can give you all that information. Honestly, I just throw out, hey guys, I need your help. Angels, please come in and help me. And I don't necessarily have names for any of them, I just call them in. So
Mhm.
that's a big group that we all have all the time.
Cool.
Soul Council is a group of beings. They're these incredibly wise beings who do not incarnate. They're in
Mm,
the non-physical, in the spirit world. They're this energy. They
right.
are there. They work specifically with different souls and help you plan each lifetime and help you review when you return to the soul place.
Cool.
And so they help
Cool.
you look through, and as a soul now, not as a human being, but as a soul, they
Mm,
help you discern, okay, in all of these lives, you have always had issues with keeping a job, and you've sabotaged yourself over and over again, and you've done silly things.
mm,
So the soul agrees to bring in all of that information, and in this life, try to work through that karmic energy, if you will, those patterns,
Uh,
so that you can let
mhm.
those go and be more successful in each life that you have after that. Or if you consistently have trouble with relationships, so you bring in a
Mhm.
lot of this memory from all the horrible relationships you've had eternity.
Mhm.
This time, then you have those patterns, and you hopefully can discern that and then change it so that you can stop having those same kinds of
Okay.
relationships. So
Cool.
I think the soul council is there kind of overall helping us as a soul to say, this is what I want to experience and learn as a soul, as a human being this lifetime, and then helping us remember that as we move along as a soul. Other beings of light, sometimes they're ascended masters, those
Oh,
Jesus,
cool.
Mother
Oh,
Mary.
very cool.
So all those ascended masters that have had human lives, but now are in
Um,
the non-physical, but still want to help humanity, they're available as well to come in,
very cool.
to sit with us, to help us with specific issues. And all you have to do
Very
is
cool.
think about them or call them in, and they'll show up.
Very cool. And then spirit guides, so are those also people that have been human, or are they loved ones that have crossed over? What does that encompass?
Can be both. So
Okay.
guides are also non-physical beings. Some have had physical lives. Um, some have had a physical life or two, but then chose to stay in the non-physical and work as your guide. Sometimes it is family members. Sometimes a
Cool.
grandparent or a parent or a sibling or whoever will pass away and then agrees to come back as your guide and walks with you and guides you then through the rest of your life as your guide. So
Cool.
you can have more than one guide. Guides can come and go. Um, I think generally my experience has been that I have one, what I call my main guide, who comes with me every time, who
Cool.
has had a physical life where we knew each other, but then has
Oh,
always stayed in the
cool.
non-physical, but always comes with me no matter where and how I incarnate. So that being knows me
Cool.
really well. But I've also
Mm.
asked for specific guides for specific things. Um,
Oh, cool.
just quickly, when I discovered that you could do that, again, one of the books I read, they said you can ask for a specific guide for something. So I was trying to buy a house at the time, uh,
Oh, cool.
and didn't know anything about it, didn't really have a lot of money. So I asked for a guide that knew banking, like real estate banking and real estate, like knew about selling.
Cool.
So I found this house I really wanted. So this guide shows up one day and says, I'm here. And I was like, excuse me? So I'm the guide you asked for. It's like, okay. And he
Cool.
said that he would be working with me to make the offer, set everything up,
Wow.
be able to get the house. So it all worked out. The day that we closed, this was during the 80s, early 80s, when the interest rates were very, very high and it was almost
Mm.
impossible to get a loan. And the day that we were closing, the interest rates dropped just enough that she made the closing. Right after she did that, they jumped right back up. My real estate agent called me and said, if that hadn't happened, you wouldn't have been able to get the house, get the loan. I just
Oh my
laughed and
God.
went, thank you. I knew my guide had impacted that. So after we got through all
Wow.
the paperwork, the house was mine. I came home to my apartment that evening,
Oh.
walked in, and there was the smell of tobacco, pipe tobacco in my house.
Mm.
Nobody smoked a pipe tobacco. Nobody had that. So I stopped in the middle of the room and said, okay, are you here? I could feel this energy around me. And it was
Mm.
this guide who stepped in and just said, hey, congratulations. I'm so glad this worked out for you. Our time is finished and I will be on my way. And he left, and
Cool.
I've never had him come back again. He was there for that one
Wow.
specific purpose.
Oh my God. Wow.
So I never
Oh.
doubted then that, yes, we can call in a guide for anything. I have to
Wow.
remember to do that.
Sure, yeah.
But yes, when I do, there's always someone who's willing to step in and offer us support. I think the main thing with any of these beings, guides, angels, whoever, we need to ask for their help. They want to be asked, partly because they can't override our free will. Humans have free will, and they respect that tremendously. They can't just bust in and tell you what to do or not do or stop certain things, because it may not be something that's in your best interest. So you have to ask. I think in certain instances when I'm driving, because I give my angels permission as soon as I get in my car, I don't even ask them. They will stop my car if I'm heading for disaster. So there are times when they will intervene if it's life and death, I think. But I've already given them a blanket permission by just saying, hey, come be with me today while I drive. So because of our free will, we have the choice to make bad choices and to go down the wrong path. And they're standing there trying to help us, but we have the right to ignore them, and they can't really intervene with that, because we have things that we need to experience. We have specific situations that we've set up as a soul to experience, so they can't interfere with that.
They can't override our free will. Yeah, our free will and these soul contracts that we have agreed to, right?
Exactly. I mean, we can always say, no, I'm not going to do that, and that's our free will, and we can do that. I find that I can say that, and then of course I find myself going ahead and doing it anyway, because they're just guiding me, and it's like, okay, all right, just surrender. I always laugh and just say resistance is futile at this point. I just do what they tell me.
Oh my gosh. So I'm wondering, I know you said you're primarily clairaudient, so the hearing and the channeling, and you've started to develop the other, quote, clairs throughout your life. So after hearing, what would you say is your next strongest clair ability? Would it be your psychic seeing with your third eye? Or your knowing, or you said you had smelling that one time, you could smell the tobacco in the room. That's cool.
That's a rare one. It comes and goes. Thank goodness, I don't have the olfactory one very often.
Yeah.
Probably hearing, and then probably I will get, when I'm channeling for folks, I will actually see, I'll get like a vision or a picture of something. So like if I'm doing a past life, like if I'm getting past life information, I will actually see that almost like a movie in my mind's eye. I never thought I was kinesthetic until I did a reading for a friend a long time ago, and she's very kinesthetic. So everything that the information that they were channeling through me was in my body. And so I would have to say, oh, I'm feeling this in my right shoulder. Oh, I'm feeling this, in my leg. I'm feeling this here. And just describe it to her. It made total sense to her. She knew exactly what the messages were. I had no idea. I had to just stay with it and just keep feeling what I was feeling and reporting it to her. And that's the way she best received the message at that time. That was amazing to me. I had never had that experience before. I had never even paid attention to receiving anything kinesthetically. Now I find when I pay attention, I actually do. I can feel when someone's heart space is closed or open. I can feel in my gut, or I can feel my solar plexus constrict if there's, something going on there. I was with a friend, and it's like if suddenly my stomach starts to hurt, like some tightens up and it starts to hurt a little, that's never a good sign. That means there's something not quite right in the environment.
Wow.
So the more that I pay attention to that, the more I can pick up on those energies around me and use that for discernment as well, and to also bring messages forth, for sure.
Wow. What's so amazing to me is really everyone has the ability to access this intuition, these messages, these knowings. And it sounds like, and to talk to our guides, to ask for their help. And from all the things you're describing, it's like, wow, it can really improve our lives. Even like you said, just the gut feeling, something's off about this place.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, how
Or a person.
cool.
Yeah. I mean,
Or a
if
person.
you walk
Sure.
into a room and the person's sitting there and you suddenly, for me, if I suddenly my stomach starts to hurt and I start to feel this tenseness, I know to get the heck out of there because it's probably not someone I need to be interacting with.
Wow. So it's really helpful information.
It is. And that's the thing. It's, I think I did when I started. I thought it was only these special people who could be psychic,
Right.
hear the voices or get the
Right.
messages. When I discovered I could, I was floored. It's like, no, that can't be right. Not me. I
Sure,
just
yeah,
know
not me. I'm a normal person.
exactly. It's like, no, I can't. I don't have that ability. And what I've just read, but also discovered for myself is everybody has this ability. Everyone, and we all do it all the time. We just don't call it that. Everyone will say, well, I had this gut feeling the other day. And so
Yeah.
that's one of the ways that we receive information. And for some people, that's how they get it. And they always follow their intuition, their gut feeling, and they're always accurate. That's your guide or some being of light, an angel who's getting that message to you in whatever way you can best understand it. So we all have it, we all use it, we just don't think about it in the same way.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So, Laurie, I have a couple questions for you. It looks like we're kind of coming up to the hour mark. I have a couple more things to kind of wrap up here. And then also, if there's anything else you feel like you really want to share.
Sure.
So, one of my last questions for you is now that you have retired from your work as a social worker and a therapist, and you can really be yourself, right? It sounds like you can be your whole self and be openly, a psychic and a channeler. How would you say that's changed your life to be able to be open about it, to and just to be fully committed to who you are, owning these abilities? How has that been for you?
It's very freeing. I feel like so my life is so much happier. I feel totally in alignment with who I am as a human being and as a soul and with source. And what I've discovered is I've been basically drawn to me as a result of all of this, all of these people in my life now who are on their own spiritual path that I can have these conversations with, that I can interact with openly and honestly. And it's so
Cool.
freeing. It's so wonderful. This is probably the happiest I've ever been because I feel like
Wow.
I'm in alignment and I have brought in all of these beings into my life who are also working on their path and in their alignment with source. So I feel like it's like the best time of my life at this point. I'm so happy. And
Woohoo!
yeah, it's unfortunate that I didn't feel like I could be that before. My hunch
Yeah.
is I probably could have been more that way and just chose not to because of fear, which fear stops us from a lot of things. I was fearful of judgment, when I was working and what would other professionals think of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations on, taking that leap, coming out, coming forward, sharing publicly and openly about your abilities and your story, and just fully embracing it. That's really courageous.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love what I do. I love doing readings. I really do. I love that interaction. I love interacting with the people who come and the beings that come through to talk to them. It's always fascinating to me. I never know what to expect.
Cool. So that was going to be one of my last questions for you. If people want a reading with you, how do they get a hold of you? And do you also do online readings or is it just in person there in Colorado?
No, I actually have stopped doing, except unless I'm doing a fair locally, I do all my readings on Zoom. So
Oh,
it
cool.
just has worked out so well. It's one of the
Cool.
good things I think that came out of the pandemic. So I can see people no matter where they are. So the best way to get in touch with me, because I do not have a website at this point, would be my email address. It's myspiritualsojourn, SOJOURN, laurie@gmail.com.
Okay, cool. And I'll write that out in the description so people
Okay.
can find that email and get a hold of you if they'd like to do a reading with you.
That would be lovely. Yeah, please do just shoot me an email. I'll get back with you and we'll find a time and get you scheduled.
Cool. And I'll also say I personally have had a channeling session with Laurie, and she's amazing, amazing. And it was so impactful, so high vibrational, so loving, so helpful. So I definitely recommend her. Love her channeling. She's such a beautiful soul. So I'll leave that email if people want to get a hold of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Lori, is there anything else you want to share as we wrap up today? It's been such a pleasure. And I just feel like all the information you've shared is going to help so many people, whether they're curious about guides or angels, having these psychic abilities, hearing voices, channeling, where do I start? I feel like you've shared so much, or even people that are kind of closeted psychics or closeted healers. I feel like they could really connect to you and the story and your journey. And so I feel like that's really going to inspire a lot of people to either come out of the closet or to kind of take that leap of faith like you did. And like you said, it's been so freeing. Now you're attracting people. So I feel like there's so many beautiful nuggets in this interview today. Is there any last words you'd like to share? Anything else you feel like that would be helpful for people that are tuning in to the interview?
I guess the last thing would be to trust your own intuition, trust your own knowing, and always go with that.
Wow. So it's really, we all have that, right? Inside.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Laurie. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.